Do you ever feel like you're working really hard to improve on certain areas of your refereeing, but it just isn't translating to your more difficult games? A lot of the time this happens because we're not working on the thing that's actually holding us back on those games. And a lot of the time, this limiter is fitness. As you know, there's a bunch of different areas that can become a factor. These can be things like mechanics, communication, just to name a couple. But at any one time, there's probably one or two of them that are actually holding you back. That's your rate limiter. And that's the thing that we need to attack so that we can continue to improve on those difficult games. For a lot of us at some point, that limiter is going to be our fitness. So what do I mean when I say rate limiter? Essentially, it's the one or two things that are holding you back from refereeing at a high level. Now let's talk about in terms of cooking in a kitchen. If I were to ask you right now to cook a 3-course meal for 20 people, you might say you can't. Why not? What's your reason? It might come down to space, maybe the amount of people that are helping you, maybe even the amount of ingredients that you have in the fridge. For me, it might be the amount of space in my kitchen. I've only got 2 stovetops and this oven is not big enough to cook for 20 people in a short amount of time. So even if I get more ingredients or have more hands on deck, it's not going to be useful. It's just going to create chaos. Now imagine that we double the size of the kitchen. I might have the space now to fit more people in and we can operate around each other so that we can cook a lot quicker. But at the end of the day, if I don't have the ingredients, I'm not going to be able to cook for 20 people anyway. See how the limiter keeps on shifting? Now imagine that I did a really good job with those 20 people and all of a sudden you want me to cook for 50. Unlikely, but it could happen. Guess what? I'm just going to be limited by the same things again, but at a higher scale. At any time, the limiter is just shifting based on what is more difficult for us in the game than what our current capabilities allow for us to do. At any given time, we're just limited by different things that don't allow us to make the amount of food that you are asking for. Just like in the kitchen, reffing is going to have its own shifting limiters. When you start it out, it's about learning the basics. But as you move along, it's going to change. And a lot of the time, we run into fitness as one of those rate limiters. When I started out reffing, all of my rate limiters were skill-based. Where do I stand? Is that LGP? What am I even supposed to say to this coach right now? But if you get good, then you start ticking these off. And if you're watching this, you've probably been through multiple cycles of fixing something and then having to fix it again when you get to a different level. That's the right way to improve. But at some point, fitness becomes your rate limiter. It might be when you start out and you're just trying to keep up with the amount of games that you're doing. It might be as you step up onto a level that's a lot quicker than what you're used to, or maybe even quicker than what you played at. At some point, fitness is your rate limiter. Whether it's your endurance to keep up your consistent performance throughout a game or even multiple, your speed to stay ahead of the play, or even your robustness to stay healthy across a season, at some point or another, fitness will potentially become a rate limiter for you. For some, it becomes their rate limiter right away. For me, I was a C grade that struggled to keep up with under 18s and men's games initially. For others, it happens when they start reffing bulk games or they step up to a new level. Suddenly, they just can't keep up. And the really tough thing about this is that when fitness is your rate limiter, it can take a while to improve until it's not that anymore. So what are we supposed to do about it? So what do most people do when they run into fitness as an issue? They just do more games to get more reps and hope that those faster games will actually get them moving quicker. They just run more. Look, I understand the logic, but there's 2 main reasons that this is a recipe for disaster. Number 1, reffing isn't actually a really good stimulus. It doesn't push you hard enough in any of those different areas that fitness could be holding you back to actually help you develop in them. To get a stimulus for training, we need to actually be pushed against our limits for a bit of time. And during a game, you might only get that once to like 6 times, depending on the type of game it is. Second is that it's not controllable. We might spend 40 to 120 minutes, depending on the type of game, to only get those few efforts that are going to actually stimulate some sort of growth. Not only is the stimulus weak, but you can't control when or how often it's going to actually happen. So what's our alternative? So if reffing more games won't get you fitter, what will? Well, we need to identify where our rate limiter is. So if we're getting injured a lot, we probably need to start with strength training. If we're gassing out quite often, then conditioning might be our point of call. Or if we're getting beat up the court, then we need to do some level of sprint training. A good program should include at least 2, maybe even all 3 of these factors at any one time. But you want to identify which area you need to work on most so that you can put a big focus on it, or maybe even just start there. The second step is a little bit more complex. We need to make sure that we're training the right way. If you want to train top speed, but you're only hitting 95+% of our top speed once, maybe twice a session, then you're actually not training top speed. With strength training, we want to be strengthening in areas that are actually relevant for us and not just doing bicep curls in the mirror every single day. Bicep curls are fun and good for you, but they probably shouldn't make up our entire program. And if it's conditioning, we want to do it in a way that's actually going to be relevant for reffing. Going out and running a marathon actually probably isn't the best of course of action. That's a much bigger conversation for another day. The main thing is you find your limiter and you work at it. And eventually, when you get rid of that one rate limiter, another one's going to come along. And that's the cycle of improvement that draws us to reffing in the first place. So that's a bit of a how and why we need to approach fitness as a rate limiter in our reffing so that we can keep on progressing through those higher levels and it doesn't hold us back. So this is only the first episode of my RefStrong series on this channel, where I'm going to be breaking down a bunch of different ways that we can improve our physical preparation as referees. So if you want to continue seeing these kinds of videos, make sure to subscribe and we can continue preparing for game day.